Welcome back to another session of epigenetics, and I'm very excited for this session to see where this takes us and where epigenetics will lead us into healing our genes. And I don't want to give too much away. Let's get started. As always, please note that I'm a quantum soul and quantum life consultant. I am not a medical doctor, psychologist, or psychiatrist. Should you display any symptoms that are worrying to you, your first priority is to contact a medically trained professional to assist you. I'm not the right person for that. Okay, so what we learned previously, I'm going to run through this quickly. We learned that epigenetic markers are markers on top of our genes. What's the difference between our genes and our DNA? The genes is a section of the ladder with a function, while the DNA is the entire ladder. Okay, epigenetics is the study of how our behaviors and our actions and our environment will affect our epigenetic markers and in effect have an effect on our genes. Okay, genes will always stay the same. Okay, they can only be turned off and on, but they will stay the same. Epigenetic markers can turn genes on and off, and that is called methylation. Okay, so should you want any more information, here is a little link for you. Should you want to, you can follow that link and read up some more. Okay, so epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and your environment will influence your epigenetic markers and how these markers cause changes in your body that affect the way your genes work. I think it's very important to just stop here for a moment and ask ourselves, what changes? Okay, and mostly it's a chemical change. Okay, your body uses chemicals and how chemicals bind together and how it allows how a combination of a lock-key system allows things to move from outside of a cell into a cell, and that's all chemistry. Okay, so the change that happens is mostly chemical. So let's look a bit further. Studies done to show or prove epigenetics is the nature versus nurture study. So nature, before we understand what the study is, we need to understand again, just quickly recap. What is nature? What is nurture? Nature is the genes. It is the code. The code will always be there. The code will always be the same. You've inherited it. There's nothing you can do to change the genes itself. What you can, however, influence is how the genes will express themselves. Okay, how they will be transcribed is the proper medical term. So nature is your environment and your behaviors and how that will have a chemical effect on your epigenetic markers, and in effect will cause them to turn off and on. Genes bind in such a way that they react to our current environment, and that's the job of the epigenetic marker. Okay, so studies, other studies that have been done is they did studies where they realized our environment trigger a reaction here. I said it chemical, which causes a gene expression. Okay, we're going to get to this now. But mostly the best way they found to do the studies, how do you do a study on genes if everyone's genes are different? You know, the only people in this world with the same genes will be identical twins. And so they've done studies with identical twins because they have the same DNA. So whatever their environments and their behaviors and their choices have done will create different attributes in the two different twins. I don't know if attributes is the right word. If the right word comes up, I'll pop it in. Okay, so identical twins have the same DNA, but how can they be so different? It is because of their environment, maybe their behavior. Is it things that they choose? They choose how to react, their ethos that they choose to live their life by. All of these things will take someone with exactly the same genetic code and make two different individuals out of them. And that's actually amazing. Our uniqueness relies on epigenetics, even for the simple things that two people that are identical twins will not be the exact same person. Okay, so it again brings us back to those spheres of your genes have an effect of nature and nurture. It's the gene, the individual's choices, and their environments. And remember, the gene is whatever is inherited on top of that gene comes along with. Okay, so the question we need to ask ourselves then is, can we change our epigenetics? And how will that affect our genes? And obviously we don't want to change everything, because the things that are good, we want to remain behind. Okay, so how do we make sure the past does not repeat itself? And I want you to just focus with me that I'm focusing on negative things that you want to change. We don't want to change the positive things. We actually just want to multiply them so that the next generation will get even more good habits and more good markers. Okay, so this is something so interesting that I found. I absolutely love this analogy and just using this as an example. So let's say, for example, that you are the blue person, okay? The cell, the egg cell that made you. So I don't know if you're aware, but whenever the gender is determined with a baby in the womb, a female's body will make all of the cells that she will have, this is reproductive egg cells, that she will have for her entire lifetime is already made when she herself is in the womb. And that's the amount that you'll have. There will never be more, there will never be less. That's the amount that you have. And that's determined when your mom is in the womb. So if you are the blue person, your mom is the red person, then you see this little blue dot here in the womb with mom is you. And so we see whatever Gran did while she was pregnant with mom will have a direct effect on us, because we were already a cell in mom. So whatever Gran ate will be an epigenetic marker that will be passed down and will directly affect the cell that is you. Okay, whatever Gran talked, whatever she said, whatever she experienced, whatever she felt, all of that, you are a cell in her body and it will affect you. Okay, and this picture is specifically on nicotine dependence. You can see the smoking, and you can see that while Gran is smoking while pregnant, the cell that made you will probably have some nicotine in it, and so you will get nicotine dependency as a problem. Okay. So this is just such an amazing overview. So all our behaviors are added to our genes, and they're also added to our reproductive cells, right? Remember, the genes are in the cells. And so the cell, the reproductive cells, have half of your genes in it. And so your relationships with people, the medication you take, the amount of money you have, if you played sport or not, did you do any drugs, what did you eat and drink, all of these things will be added onto your genes as information and memory. And that's why it's so important to make sure that what we do in our lifetime is positive and good, that we pass down more good than the not so good. Okay, so obviously your psychological state will have an effect on your cells. And so there are so many studies, and I'll probably do a podcast on it later on, but there are so many studies that show that your psychological state, gratitude, has such an immense effect on your success in life. And that the most successful people are people that are utter narcissists and just don't care how they step on people to get to the top, or people that are really, really so totally grateful for everything that they have. They're happy with what they have. They'll even be happy with less. They don't mind. Your social interactions, your alternative medicine that you use, therapeutic drugs, your microbiome or microbiome, it depends, some people pronounce it differently, but this is actually pathogens meaning small microorganisms that live in your gut, your small intestine and your large intestine. And it's actually been shown that these microbiomes or microbiomes, they communicate directly with the brain. So they don't even have a communication that's chemical. They have a direct communication with the brain. Your exercise, your financial status, all of these things will be information that's passed on to the next generation. So turning genes on and off, we want the genes, for example, dealing with our eyesight, being able to see, we want that turned on. I don't want that turned off, so, but for example, that many people have the aggression gene, they call it the MAOA gene, and that's a gene that they found that most people that display aggression have this gene, and it's turned on with an epigenetic marker. But when the gene for eyesight, for example, is turned off, we see that something has gone wrong, something has been damaged, that this marker has been turned off, or that the gene isn't properly working. And we need to understand that it's years and years of piled on negative markers that causes something to turn off that should be turned on. Okay. So changing our habits and our behaviors, whatever we change in our lifetime, will be passed down to the next. So whatever positive change you make, your children will reap the benefit of that. So changing our habits and our behaviors, does this mean I can change my eye color? Of course not. The gene that's the information for the gene that you have, and that's the information that will always be there. But your habits can either give you healthy eyes or unhealthy eyes. You can maybe struggle with eye allergies and you're constantly using eye drops, or you might get cataracts, or you might have some problem with muscles in your eyes, etc., etc. Maybe it's even an emotional eyesight problem where you're unable to see or plan for the future, where you are, we don't see the future, but plan for the future, where you're unable to see yourself in a situation of blessing and just overflow and happiness, you know. So it can also be psychological and emotional. Okay, so we look today at nature versus nurture. I have inherited behaviors from my environment, for example, if you think of mom in the womb with gran, that's an inherited behavior, that nicotine dependency. And you might be exposed to other things, emotions, trauma, anxiety, reacting out of a pain that is actually not yours. Your anxiety might be inherited. It might not be your anxiety. So if you look back on your life and you think, where does all of this anxiety come from? Maybe the answer is it's on your genes. And so I can change my epigenetic marker, and that will change how my genes express themselves. Okay, so I hope you learned along with me, and I hope that you enjoyed this session, and then I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today in this podcast. I hope it enriched your life. Until next time, blessings.